Okay, what up ladies and gents, it's your favorite Asian robot right here, hopefully your favorite official content creator for the First Descendant, and today I'll be phasing in and out of reality while we talk about how critical hit resistance in this game works, alright? I'm very ashamed about this, but in actuality, well, 2 days ago, I found out that, I'm going to remove my cam for this, I found out that you can actually see the critical hit resistance in the game. If you look down the bottom, there's something that says battle info. If you click on that, it actually shows you critical hit resistance for firearm skills, all the stats about the Colossi. You can even change the number of participants to see how its hit points and shields change, along with the attack and defense. By the way, more participants means that the Colossi does more damage, FYI. So yeah, you can see all this stuff that they didn't show you before, or maybe I just missed it before, but now this button exists, all right? Once again, you'll find it down the bottom. It's basic info. All right. It shows it for pretty much any Colossus in the game. So when I saw that you can now see critical hit resistance, I wanted to test this because how does it work? Is it flat? Is it a limiter? Is it multiplicative? There are many ways that critical hit resistance of 40 could work, and they don't exactly have a tooltip here to show you. So I decided to test it myself, and the results are pretty interesting. So let's take a look at the results that we determined on last night's stream. I have all of it recorded in an Excel spreadsheet. You can actually search up the stream if you want to. All right, the choice is yours. But anyway, I'll go through the testing, how we did all that, and then I'll explain the results to you. So while I phase in and out of reality, let's get started, shall we? Let me start by going into the lab, and then we'll go from there. Okay, now a little bit of info here. We use Jaber for this test simply because he is absolutely useless. Nah, I'm just kidding. I have no mods in him. Okay, I don't play Jaber. So we're going to use Jaber for the test. He has no arcade tuning. He's got no mods. The ghost of my green screen is showing up behind me because of how bright it is in Singapore right now. Sorry about that. I guess I'm just going to have to phase out of reality even more. All right. In order to do this test, what we did was we summoned the Tormentor. All right, he has a 40% skill critical hit, firearm critical hit resistance. His skill critical hit resistance is the same. All right, and what I did for the test, and just to show you, for Jaber, we have no modules equipped other than midair maneuvering. Okay, so no modules in Jaber. Inversion reinforcer is blank as well. We've taken off everything here. Arcade tuning is blank as well. We have nothing here. All right, and last but not least, we use the piercing light for this test. Why? The piercing light does not have a unique ability that affects criticals, all right? Its only ability is to dispel, or upon piercing 2 or more targets, it will gain a fixed critical hit rate. But since we only have 1 target here, you will never get this buff, so it doesn't really matter, okay? Just to prove that we'll never get this buff, let's shoot. Okay, shoot a weak point, we still have no buff. Shoot again, nothing, nothing. You can see that, right? Okay, we do get a small buff, but I'm pretty sure that's from the inversion reinforcer. Either way, that will not matter, okay? Because that buff will not matter or affect anything that we do. It will not affect damage or criticals, all right? Just to be sure, you can take a look at the inversion reinforcer perks. The area burst inducer, all it does is it increases the incoming damage, all right? This one it will give you bypass immunity. None of these affect criticals, okay? Hyperdimensional vision, when you land a firearm critical hit, you can remove debuffs for 3 seconds, and you have debuff immunity for 3 seconds. Cooldown is 60 seconds. This one can trigger as well. Crisis response system increases defense when you obtain HP and MP recovery orbs. And quantum domain, skill effect range, skill power when you use a skill. We're not using skills here, so none of these will affect the test, okay? Now for the piercing light, its base critical is 40%, so we buffed it up to 50% by putting in better insight. And we also use fire rate up so that we can conduct the test faster. And last but not least, concentration stabilizer to reduce the recoil. Although it increases critical hit damage, it doesn't affect the critical hit rate. Case in point, if we remove this, nothing happens to critical hit rate, as you can see there, right? So we're not going to change that. Better insight brings the critical hit rate on this particular weapon up to 53.2%, which is what we want. We wanted it slightly over 50 so we could make an accurate calculation. Now, how did we set up the spreadsheet? Okay, so in order to set up a proper spreadsheet to test this, what we did is this. I fired like salvos of 4 shots each, all right? And I would record whether the hit was a critical or not. So if it's not a critical, it's a 0. If it is a critical, it's a 1. We have a running total here that tallies up how many times we've hit criticals in total, all right? And that running total needs to match the sum at the end of the table, okay? This is a check to see that we've tabulated the numbers correctly. Most of you that understand accounting or numbers will understand why we have a running total to check things or to make sure that the numbers are 100% true, right? So that's how we did it. I'm going to demonstrate right now. This was our testing process. You will be able to see this on stream. What I would do is I would aim with Jaber. Okay, 1, 1, 1, 1. You see I keep getting lucky like that? If it's all criticals, I'll record 1 4 times. However, there'll be situations where, you know, you get 0, 0, 1, 0, something like that, all right? And we record all of that in the table. So, without wasting your time, how do we actually do in terms of the actual results? Okay, in terms of the actual results on the table, I shot 500 shots. How do you know I shot 500 shots? These tables all go from 1. If you scroll down all the way, it's to 100, okay? And I record the number of criticals in that set, right? I did 5 sets of this, okay? 1, 2, 3, scroll across, 4, 5. That's a total, and each one is 100, as you can see. So that is 500 shots in total. Now, when it comes to the expected results, all right, assuming that the Tormentor's resistance is 40%, if it was a flat resistance, my crit rate using the piercing light is 53.2. All right, you remember that from the weapon screen. Okay, if the Tormentor's critical hit resistance is a flat reduction, that means it's 53.2 minus 40%, which is 13.2. The critical rates that we saw were nothing close to this, so it's not the case there. If there is a limiter, I should have gotten close to 53.2% anyway, because what a limiter means is that, okay, the max cap you can increase your critical hit rate to, assuming critical hits go from 1 to 100%, the max cap would be 60%. All right, so I should have been able to get a ratio close to 53.2, and that's why we have to shoot so many times, because, you know, in some cases, I only hit 29 crits, some cases I hit 39 crits, both of which are actually above the average rate. All right, so this one is under, this one is over the average rate, so you got to average it out. This is why the law of large numbers works. If you guys do not know about that, I suggest you look it up. But basically, the closer we get to, like, say something like 1,000 shots in total, the closer we get to the true average. But since I didn't have time to do 1,000 shots, we did about half that, 500. But we still got a pretty accurate result. All right. Now, the last thing I want to say is that since it's not flat and it's not a limiter, we checked if it was multiplicative. What does it mean by if multiplicative? Okay, that means that 53, and just to show you how we did the calculation, 53.2%, which is our critical hit rate, all right, if we were to take that, and considering that the Tormentor's resistance is 40%, that means 40% less from 100, okay, you should multiply this by 60%. So 0.6. Take note that we got, if we turn this into a percentage, 31.92. That is very close to the average result of all these tests. We got 32.6. So most likely, and I'm going to tell you the result right now, most likely the critical hit rate resistance in this game for these Colossi is multiplicative. What does this mean for your numbers? We'll go through that in a second, okay? So first and foremost, let me show you what the results of our testing were. For the first batch, I got 39 crits out of 100 shots. This means a crit rate of 39%. For the second batch, 29 crits. Third batch was also 29 crits. Fourth batch was 39 crits. And the fifth batch was 27 crits. All right? So we tallied up the actual crit rate each time. Okay? So first one, 39, 29, 29, 39, 27. Then we averaged it out. So after adding up 39 plus 29 plus 29 plus 39 plus 27, okay, right here, we divided all of that by 5. By dividing all of that by 5, we arrived, oops, sorry, let me just move my cam. We arrived at the final crit rate, the average crit rate of 32.6%, which is fairly close to the multiplicative crit rate. If we did another 500 shots, we'd probably get very, very close to 31.92. What does this mean for you? Okay, I'm sure that's the important part that you're concerned with. Okay, what does it mean for you? Okay, for you as a player, right, what this means is that no matter what critical hit rate you have, if a boss or a monster or whatever has a crit hit rate resistance of 40% or 30%, all right, you will have to multiply that into your crit rate to determine the final result. Let me show you an example. We're going to work through an example. I'm going to do it a couple of times so you guys understand it, and then we can move on, all right? Okay, so here is how it will work. Let's say, for example, we're just going to use this table right here. We're going to clone this table right here. Let's say enemy resistance, okay? Let's say that they have a crit rate resistance of 25%, okay? Just as an example. What you have to determine in this particular case is your crit rate. So if your crit rate is, say, 40%, okay, then if, all right, you want to determine how many crits you're actually going to do, we're going to actually remove this part here so it's less confusing, okay? Your actual crit rate in battle, is going to be, sorry, I hate it when my tables are not neat. So actual rate is going to be, okay, since your crit rate is 40% and the enemy's resistance is 25%, you have to start by determining, okay, what kind of crit rate you're actually going to have. So before you can get this result, now I'm just going to show you the shortcut here. The shortcut is your crit rate multiplied by 100% minus the enemy's resistance. Okay, this is the simplest formula. So your actual crit rate is going to be 30%. How do you get that? How do you get that result? First, you have to determine, okay, if the enemy's resistance is 75%, my final rate of criticals, okay, crit rate multiplier, let's call it that, okay? So your crit rate multiplier will be 100% minus whatever this result is, 75%. So the actual rate calculation in that case, if you want to do it up this way, is 40% times 75%. There you go, the same 30%. This way you can literally set up your table in any way, shape, or form you want, and you can determine your crit rate. So let's say an enemy has a resistance of, another example, enemy now has a resistance of 65%. This means your crit rate multiplier is only going to be 35%. 100% minus 65% is 35%, right? If your crit rate was 40%, that means in actual combat, you're only going to get a 14% crit rate. Why? That's how much resistance the enemy has. If the enemy's got a low resistance of, say, 10%, all right, and then your crit rate multiplier is 90%, then when you have a crit rate of 40%, your actual crit rate is going to be 36%. What does this mean even if you have a 100% crit rate, which is the max? It means that no matter how high your crit rate is, it will always be reduced in some way, shape, or form. Okay? You could have a crit rate of 83.5%, and assuming the enemy's resistance is 10%, crit rate multiplier 90%, your actual crit rate is only going to be 75%. All right, so on and so forth. This is how this calculation works. And once you know this, it becomes a lot easier to work through your build. So first and foremost, the key takeaway from this is that even if you have a 100% crit rate, you will never hit crits 100% of the time. You could have a 100% crit rate on Haley, Viessa, doesn't really matter. You will still never crit all the time. You will crit most of the time, but not all the time. And how often you can crit will depend on this. Even with a 100% crit rate, let me just show you. If we use the Tormentor's crit hit rate resistance of 40%, okay, from the Tormentor, your multiplier is 60%, as in the actual tested example. Let's say Haley has 100% crit rate. Then the actual rate of criticals is 60%. This is literally the highest value you can get. All right, so even if you were to use a character that has 100% crit rate on the Tormentor, only 60% of your hits are going to be criticals. This is why the ATOMs is so inconsistent, because it doesn't matter how high you push the crit rate, the Tormentor's resistance is massive. This matters less for weapons like, for example, the Last Dagger, where you're dealing a lot of hits in a row, all right? Or say the Ancient Knight, which doesn't matter because it doesn't have crits. You're just going purely for multi-hit with Serena, all right? All that's not going to matter. So take note of the crit hit rate resistance of the enemy, all right? And use that as a multiplicative factor whenever you are working with your builds, all right? And if somebody else tells you out there that you can get 100% crit rate, okay, now you know you can't, because now we can see the actual crit hit rate resistance of the enemies, all right? I know I get very excited about math, but I love math. So this is how it works, okay? I hope that this information helps you guys. I hope that it helps to explain how all of this works and why you will never be able to reach 100% crit rate. But, okay, If you do take note of these things, you can determine whether or not a crit build is going to be effective and efficient. All right, because even if you have low crits, if you already have low crits on your weapon, then this resistance is going to make those low crits even worse. But if you have high crits, then maybe you can still stand a chance, assuming you can put out enough damage. All right. So hopefully this helps in future. Like, this knowledge will be applicable even in future, because that's just how the formula works. So in future, if there are other colossi that have different crit hit rate resistances, you can determine what kind of build you want to go for when you're facing them. All right. Thank you very much for watching this video. I'm sorry that about the detailing and all that, because like I said, my neck is sprained, so I'm a little less enthusiastic than normal, but I hope that it helps you guys. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. And for anyone that was ever wondering about crit hit rate resistance, well, there you go. This is all the information you'll ever need. Okay, thank you very much. I'll see you guys on the next one. Y'all have a good one. And if any of you guys want to test other stuff, all right, or you've got other stuff that shows a completely different test, then you can feel free to detail that and let me know. Okay, catch you later.